Hey guys, it's Allie. Today I'm going to talk at you about having a shooting kit for when you're shooting in stop motion. It's a really smart thing to do, especially if you're going to be shooting a lot for school or whatever. It's nice to have a kit that you can just kind of grab and take with you, and it has all the tools and materials and everything you need for things that come up when you're shooting. So first off, I have a toolkit here, a toolbox here that I got for like $4 from like Home Depot or Lowe's. Super low cost, which is nice. I'll just start up at the top here and kind of go clockwise. I've got a lint roller here, especially if your puppets have any fabric on them. It's really good to lint roll them before you start shooting. You wouldn't necessarily think so, but every little hair or every little piece of dust or dirt or whatever that is on your puppet will show up in your shot. So it's good to clean your puppets and things before you start shooting. You can also pick up little bits of dirt or sand or whatever with that. Duct tape is always good to have around no matter what you're doing, obviously. Black duct tape is nice, just because it's a little more low-key. It's not going to grab the light from the lights or anything. You could also get grip tape, but it's basically duct tape. It's just more expensive. So duct tape works fine. You can also use duct tape to tape wires down to the floor so you're not tripping yourself. You tend to end up with a bunch of wires with, everything's plugged in. Baby wipes I'm a big fan of, even though, I don't know, I'm just a big fan of them. It makes me sound like a soccer mom or something. But it's really nice to have some kind of hand wipes around, especially if you're going to work with something like plasticine. If you're working with some red plasticine, that red color will come off onto your hands, and then you go to touch some white plasticine, and suddenly your white plasticine is not so white anymore. And just in general, if there's dirt on your set and you're pushing the dirt around, you need to just keep cleaning your hands so you keep everything clean and tidy. Back here in the corner, I have a drill. So drills are really important to have and to know how to use in general as a human. This one I stole from my dad, and I'm not giving it back. I tend to prefer drills that plug into the wall rather than battery-powered ones. I feel like battery-powered drills and battery-powered vacuums and stuff just don't have the same power, and the batteries eventually get weaker and ugh, no. So I want some real power in my power drills, I guess, my power tools. So anyway, with your drill, you would want to drill because puppets often can't stand up on their own, and when you're going to be touching it and taking a picture, touching it and taking a picture, the puppet's going to be moving all over the place. So most puppets need to be screwed down to the set. Even if you're going to make them walk, they have to be screwed down, and then you move it a little bit, and then unscrew the one foot, and then move it, and then re-screw it back down. And then also for your set, you might need a power drill. So have a drill around, and have at least 1 or 2 driver bits, which are the ones that have like the Phillips or the flathead, the ones that the screw actually goes into, and have a whole set of drill bits, which are the ones that are like twisty looking. You should also be familiar with what the heck a drill bit is and a driver bit. I was a little bit scared that my advanced stop-mo students did not know the difference between those things. And everybody should know that. Here we've got a little extension cord, but this is like a household extension cord. I mean, so maybe it's okay for plugging like your hot glue gun or whatever, but if you're working with like professional lights that draw a lot of power, you're going to want like a more heavy-duty extension cord than just like this little thing right here. But it's always good to have an extension cord. You never think you're going to need it. You never think of it until, you do need it. I have some gloves here because, again, with professional lighting, those things get hot. I have cooked a burrito on top of one. I've melted down plasticine on top of one. I have burned myself on them before. So I just have regular little winter gloves that I got from Joann Fabrics, that like the high school punk girl that I was, that's still inside of me, is really pleased about the skeleton look. There we go. Anyway, so those are good to have. Amongst all the different tools that you're going to want to have are just any kind of tweezers. If you can get a whole selection of different types of tweezers. I'm trying to get this to focus okay. Okay. So these are just different types of tweezers. No matter what you're doing in stop motion, tweezers are great, especially if you're working with paper mouths or paper pupils on eyes or switching out eyes or whatever. Tweezers are awesome to have. You'll notice that there's actually a number of different hygiene tools that are really helpful for sculpture and for stop motion. Maybe it's a little awkward, but I don't know, they work really well. Obviously some super glue. I don't love super glue. It's really, it's so watery, it kind of just like gets everywhere, and then it always seems to end up more on your fingers than on what you're trying to actually glue. It's good that it comes in these little containers because it always dries out really easily, really fast. It seems like it's a one-time use thing, and then you pretty much have to throw it away because the whole thing's dried out. So super glue, I don't know, but it's good to have. One of the things I've come across more, I like using my 5-minute epoxy. So I'll talk about this in one of my other videos, but 5-minute epoxy, you've got 2 parts, part A and part B. You mix equal parts of both of them. This sets in 5 minutes and it's super strong, and it's like, it's more viscous. It's not as liquidy as the super glue. So I love using this stuff. That's really helpful. Clear nail polish can be really helpful because that dries really fast too. I have over here a hot glue gun. So you could get a little one and a big one if you want. If they have the same size nozzle, then there's not really any point. But little glue gun you might be able to get into smaller spaces with. Whatever, they're pretty cheap anyway. So have a hot glue gun and have a ton of extra sticks. You'll use more than you think that you will use. And one of the things for hot glue, professionals will use sandbags to hold down the tripod and maybe the lights and stuff, but I'm not a professional. I mean, maybe someday I will be, hopefully, I don't know. But usually the best hack is just to like hot glue down the legs of your tripod, of your camera tripod. Because one of the things that's an issue with stop motion is when you accidentally knock your camera and then suddenly everything's off alignment, and you're in the middle of a shoot and you can't get your camera as hard. You can spend hours trying to get your camera back to exactly where it was, and you will never get there. You pretty much have to start your whole shoot over again. So making your tripod stuck to the floor, it's not going to go anywhere. That's really important. That's one of the uses for hot glue. Obviously, there's a bunch of other things that could come up during your shoot that you want to use for hot glue. I'm going to try to get this done in 10 minutes. We'll see. I've got 3 minutes left until it's done, so yeah, it's not going to happen. All right. It's good to have a whole selection of different sculpture tools around. So let's break down some of these. This is called a ribbon tool. This is a pretty classic clay tool. It takes sort of a ribbon section out of a clay material, and it's also sort of the ends are sort of like ribbon of metal. So one of those is the reason why it's called a ribbon tool. I have a bunch of dental tools, actually. I got a whole set of dental tools from Amazon. They can be really good for sculpture. This is why Amazon thinks that I'm a dentist and keeps giving me weird recommendations. I mean, it's always giving me weird recommendations because everything I buy on there is really random. But I really like these sculpture tools that have silicone tips, so you can get them in different sizes. They're good for sculpting all kinds of clay, all kinds of materials, really, because they don't stick. Silicone, you know, it doesn't stick to anything. That's why there's so many kitchenware things that are made out of silicone. But anyway, I've been using paper mouths and paper pupils for the eyes for my thesis project, and so I'm able to stick those paper things onto the face, and then I can kind of push them around and get them aligned with these silicone tips. So I found them really helpful. So any of the things that you use for sculpting, you can really throw in your kit for shooting as well. I will try to remember to put a link to these guys in the description here because I really love them, and I got a whole set of them, like 4 or 5 of them for like $3 on Amazon. They have these silicone tips on the one end, and then they have these, I'm not sure what, it's like a ball bearing tip on the other end, and the whole set, they all have different sizes. I've seen these intended for use for nail art, for making dots and stuff on nail art, but they're really, really helpful for a number of different things. And a lot of videos I've watched on YouTube of sculptors who are sculpting in miniature, especially faces in miniature, they use these tools a lot. So I noticed that, and I decided to try to get myself some. So yeah, those are some great sculpture tools and tools for animating in general. I've got a file here. You never know if you'll need a file to, you know, wire or whatever. So, you know, throw a bunch of things in your kit that you don't even think you'll need, and maybe you might end up needing them. So these are palette knives. So when you're dealing with different types of paint that have a lot of body, so like they're really thick, almost like a buttercream icing, you can use palette knives to paint with them basically, and to mix them and all those kinds of things. So these are good for having around. the other nice thing with palette knives, you know, they're spatulas basically, but they're like real bendable, which is nice, and you can get them in different shapes. Again, I got like a really cheap set from Amazon, but I use these. You'll see in the puppets. I'll talk about the puppets that I made for my thesis. And the type of eyes that I had. I had these magnetic interchangeable eyes, and it helped me using these like flimsy spatula palette knives. I was able to kind of scoop and get those eyes out to be able to replace with a different eye. So I found that helpful. These guys are just helpful for a bunch of things, like slicing clay and all kinds of stuff. So it's good to have those around if you can. Scissors, especially if you're working with any kind of paper. Scissors in general are just always good to have. Different types of knives. Let's kind of come over here. Different types of knives. So you've got like your standard X-acto knife, which is referred to as an 11. A number 11 blade is what you need for a standard X-acto knife. So you can get packs of a bunch of different blades, which is great. And usually you want to use like really sharp blades, especially if you're working with paper, because dull blades will just kind of chew up the paper. They won't make a nice cut at all. This is the box cutter, so this is good for slicing cardboard or foam core or anything that you might need. This one has all kinds of special capabilities. I got it from working at Trader Joe's, and I was supposed to give it back when I stopped working there, and I did not. So I also have a holster for it, which is badass. Anyway, right here actually I have makeup. Can actually be really helpful for some of your puppets if they have like a hard head. If it's plasticine, makeup's not going to help. It's just going to kind of make a mess. But one of my puppets had to blush at one point, so I actually used just blush. This is just like a little makeup blush, and I just use a little brush to kind of put it on, and then I was able to just wipe it off with a baby wipe. This little guy, this is a little sample of a translucent powder. So this is a white powder. It doesn't add any color, but it mattifies. So it's supposed to be intended for humans. This camera doesn't want to focus. So it's intended for humans to mattify, to make your face not shiny anymore without adding color. So this has been really great. I don't like when my puppets have really shiny faces. So it's nice to have something like this around. You could easily use something like cornstarch or baby powder, which is cornstarch. You could use a number of things like that to kind of... oh, look, I use the bottom as a palette. I do that all the time. Yeah, so a good way to make your puppet's face not so shiny. If that's a concern that you have, especially with the lights flashing on the set, yeah, you can have some shine issues with a puppet. You should always have a bunch of brushes around, especially if you're going to be using like little bits of makeup. You can brush off dust and things from the set. You can clean off your puppets' faces. You might end up doing some painting. You never know. So it's always good to have a bunch of different shapes and sizes of brushes in there. This is called a chip brush. You can get packets of these. These are like, so this is a 3-inch. It's a 3-incher. But these are just real cheap brushes you can use for whatever and then just kind of throw them out. They're not really a brush that you'd keep using forever because they're just cheap. So they're good for like plaster, if you're painting plaster onto something, brushing dust and dirt and things off of a set. I had a lot of sets that were set outdoors, so I had some actual dirt and sand and like grass fibers and stuff, so it helped to have one of these brushes to kind of push things around, make it look natural, and also clear off certain spots so I could glue something down or screw something down. So yeah, chip brushes are good to have. You can get different sizes. So, and then over here I've got a bunch of different, I think it's good just to have a couple different types of clips, because you never know if like your backdrop is falling down, or you want to hold something up while you want to hold up a hand or something while it dries. You never know. Always, just like duct tape, always good to have around. So that's everything I have here. This is what I would call the basics. Next I'll show you some things that I found helpful with working with paper, specifically like paper mouths and things. I'll show you those things, and then just some other miscellaneous things that I've come to have in my kit. So if you're working with paper or fabric, you know, puppets that have fabric costumes or paper mouths, paper pupils for eyes, there are a couple things you want to kind of have around, possibly in your kit. Obviously, if you've got costumes that are made of fabric, you want to have some kind of like sewing kit around. Again, I use this as a palette. But this is a little sewing kit that I got from Aldi. So it has a bunch of different colors of thread in there. And then on the other side, we've got some of your little essentials for sewing. So this little guy is called a seam ripper. I guess you can't really see because of the cover, but this is called a seam ripper. So if you need to take a seam out, you can use that guy. Obviously some scissors. There's some needles in here, which is good. Different types of needles. These are just little pins. You've got a threader, which I never use probably. Safety pins, some buttons. You don't really need that. Little measuring tape, and a thimble. So I'm completely self-taught when it comes to like sewing, and one of the things about being completely self-taught is that like you come across, you realize what tools are supposed to be used for. So like I've been sewing for years and years, and I was like, man, I wish I had something to put on my finger that I could push needles that are, you know, if it's difficult to get through something, I could push needles without hurting my finger. And I was like, oh, you know what? That's probably what a thimble's for. Oh crap. That's smart. Okay. So those kind of things happen when you're kind of self-taught in terms of all kinds of stuff like that. So a sewing kit's good to have. You want to have plenty of scraps of fabric, the same fabric that your puppets are wearing, in case their costumes get dirty, or you know, it's just good to have extras of any of the materials that you're working with, any of the puppet materials that you have. So this is this is Squirt from Finding Nemo, but he is my pincushion. So yeah, it's just good to have all kinds of having pins around. So you've got, these are like flathead pins, are good to have just in case you need to pin something down, or if you have like a jacket on a costume that's like opening or something, you want to keep it closed without having to glue it or anything. You can use a little pin. The only problem is like these are kind of shiny. So if you do put one in a puppet, maybe put a dab of paint or something on top of it, so it doesn't catch the light and show. So I've got a bunch of different types of needles here. You've got tapestry needles, which have like a big hole. They're very thick, intended for tapestry, I suppose. And then some of your other more straightforward, I just poked myself somehow, more straightforward regular needles. They do make needles that are actually curved, and especially for me, I actually just made my costumes, I just like attached them to the puppet itself rather than like making them and then trying to put them on the puppet as you would with like Barbie clothes. And so it helped to have a curved needle. So this is intended for like upholstery, and they use curved needles when they're doing stitches in a person. So curved needles are good. I have had trouble finding curved needles that are thin. They're always kind of thick, which is annoying, but curved needles can be really helpful. So those are all sewing things that you can use for making a puppet and for repairing a puppet while you're animating. Again, baby wipes I mentioned before are really good to have around. One of the things I'll talk about, this is museum wax. It was like $5 on Amazon. So it's it's used in museums to keep like pottery and china and statues and things like attached to their shelves. It says quake hold. It's supposed to be able to like hold things in the event of an earthquake. I don't know that it's really capable of doing that, but this is again, it was like $5 on Amazon. So it's like a clear wax that's really sticky, and so you can use it. It comes with a little scraper guy here. So it's just like a really sticky clear wax that you can use to attach paper to something else, or you can prop up things on your set. In one of my classes we had to animate a button, just like a single button, and so obviously to make the puppet, to make the button, that was a combination of the word puppet and button. To hold the button down, to pose it basically, we used a little tiny bit of the museum wax, which was almost, you know, if you got it at the right angle, it was invisible. So it looked like the button was kind of animated on its own and being held up on its own without some kind of like fancy rig or wire or thread or something that I would have to paint out later. So yeah, so museum wax is kind of helpful to have. It might soften up a little bit in the lights, but so I saw a couple tutorials on YouTube that talked about repositionable glue sticks. So you can use this to attach, you know, any of those things on a mouth or eyebrows or whatever. And it's repositionable for, I guess, infinity, for forever. So it doesn't permanently stick on. You can kind of remove it again. I didn't really like using this guy so much. It was a little hard to get the mouse back off again, and there was a buildup of glue on the surface that got discolored. It got like, kind of like, yeah, I just didn't like it as much. But you're welcome, obviously, to try it. You got to make sure you get the repositionable. You see it says repositionable on there, because every other glue stick is a permanent bond once it dries. So that's a thing that you can try with paper. I would not suggest using super glue with paper or with fabric. It's way too liquidy. It kind of just gets everywhere, and it's very obvious when it's on, like you can see it. You can very obviously see it when it's on fabric or paper. So I would not recommend using this. I would use something thicker, and also something not water-based, because water-based things will make wood and paper warp, basically. So also, hot glue, I don't like to use hot glue on fabric unless I have to, because if you get any extra hot glue on the fabric itself, there's no getting it out. You can see it, and it's just, there's no way to get it out. Whereas with something like wax, if you get wax on a piece of fabric, you can actually take a layer or two of newspaper or paper towels, put that down on top of the fabric, and then iron on top of those paper towels, and that will melt the wax enough that it can get pulled up and absorbed by that newspaper or that paper towels. So that works for wax, but I don't think it would really work for hot glue, because hot glue can't really be absorbed the same way that wax can. You could try that if you get hot glue on a costume. I don't know. You just have to be really careful with hot glue and fabric in general. So I worked with some paper pupils for my eyelids, or for my eyes. So I got a whole series of different hole punches because it was getting annoying to cut out tiny little circles, and anyway, the tiny little circles weren't perfect circles. You could tell that, you know, they just didn't look good. So I ordered a bunch of different sizes of hole punches. So these are broken down my sizes. I marked them just so I know. So I've got like a 1/16 inch. This is a 1/8 inch. This guy is 3/16 inch. So, and then I took one of these medicine things, containers, and so I put, well, there's some extra eyes in here, extra crappy looking eyes. But, so I broke down all the different sizes and everything. They're all in here by their size. And then I ended up using, I ended up making eyes. This one, hole punch it didn't make very clean cuts, which kind of was annoying. So I ended up making eyes like that. So I had, yeah, all different sizes of eyes that I was working with until I found one that worked the best with the eyes that I had. I was also storing a little mixed up paint in here, but so those are some darker eyes there. So, and what I used to attach these eyes to the eyeballs was actually just Vaseline. So, obviously there's like some dirt and stuff in there now. But, so you've got the Vaseline, and you've got a brush that's dedicated to just that, and you can literally brush this onto the eyes. It works especially well with eyes because, I mean, the whites of eyes are moist, so the Vaseline just makes them look moist, which is realistic. And so you can put this onto their mouth also, and then onto the individual pieces that you're going to attach to them. One thing I noticed is that if you are animating one day with Vaseline and you go home and then you come back the next day, you need to renew your Vaseline. So on the puppet itself, you need to put fresh Vaseline, because it's not that it dries out, but I guess it dries out. So yeah, so refresh your Vaseline when you come back after a couple hours to your puppets. Otherwise, nothing's going to want to stick to them. Woo! There we go. So Vaseline's good for working with paper. Again, the tweezers that I mentioned, these are detail scissors that I got at Joann. So they're really good for tiny little details. You want all kinds of, you know, you want X-acto knives and extra blades for them. A ton of different blades, because working with paper, you need a super sharp blade. So as soon as a blade gets dull, you want to get a new one. This is in like a protective waxed paper, which helps to keep the blades from rusting, basically. So you've got a bunch of different blades in here that you can just switch out. These are number 11 hobby blades. So your standard X-acto knife is going to need, come on, focus camera, is going to need number 11 blades. So this is the pack of 100 blades. It was, how much was it? It was like 12 bucks, something like that on Amazon. 100 blades is a good amount. Box cutter, again, that's helpful. So for my paper mouths and paper pupils and everything, I used rice paper. Computer paper and sketching paper are thicker, and I found that the corners of the mouths would come up. They didn't want to conform to the face very well. So first off, your puppet's face, you need to have a very flat area where you're going to put any paper mouths, so you don't have as much of a problem with the corners coming up. And then, yeah, so I used rice paper, which is a very thin paper, so it's a little more delicate, but I didn't really have a problem with it ripping, especially since it had acrylic paint on top of it, which really kind of reinforced it. So, yeah, so rice paper worked best for me for all the elements on the face. I liked to use paper mouths because I thought it looked a lot cleaner. You can always shoot just a head, basically, and then later add in eyes and a mouth. You can animate those in 2D on top of your footage. So there's a lot of different options. Some people will use like replaceable jaws, all kinds of different things. So, but I found the paper that worked the best for me. So that's what I did. Other things that you might want to have around when you're shooting. These are just a couple things that I've gathered together. So obviously a tape measure is good to have, so you can measure things. Yep, yay. This is a level. This is how you can tell if something is level. So you could use this to make sure that your camera is level. It's not like crooked or anything. So that's helpful. Usually you use these when you're like hanging a picture frame or something. You want to try to make sure that that's not crooked. Basically, you want to make sure that this little bubble is in the center. That means that it's level. And so you've got, with this level, you've got like little ones on the sides too. So levels are good to have around the house. If you're working with insulation foam at all, or plaster, or a number of different materials, it's good to have a rasp. So this is it's kind of like a cheese grater, really, but it's for different materials, so you can kind of like sand them down. You can take little bits off the sides and just like shape them, basically, via a cheese grater. I like to keep nail polish around. Enamel is a really good thing to use. It goes on a ton of different, it's basically a really, really durable paint. You can use it on top of metal, you can use it on top of a whole bunch of stuff. So for eyes, the whites of eyes, I like to use some nail polish. It dries really fast, which is nice. This is just a clear coat. So when I put a magnet in an eyeball or something, I do a clear coat over top to help keep it in there so the magnet doesn't go flying out. But nail polish is fun. This is a little fan that I found on Amazon. It doesn't have to be plugged in. It's a USB rechargeable thing. But so it has like 2 speeds, and it has fun little LEDs or whatever. I don't really care about that. But it was good to have around when I was like, I had to touch up paint or something, and to get it to dry fast. This was like 13 bucks on Amazon. Super cute. I've got some extra tie-down pieces here. So the washers are these little circular things. Those you could put into the actual feet of the puppet, and then the screws that go into either these nuts, which are these kind of guys. They're kind of hexagonal. That's called a nut. it has threading on the inside, which means it has like little teeth in there, and you can put the screws, which also have threading on them. They can screw right into that nut. So in the foot of your puppet, you'd put either a nut or a washer, and then you'd use the screw to actually go through and fasten that foot to the set. So we'll talk a little bit more about tie downs. But it's good to have the extra ones around in case something happens to the ones on your puppet. This is the container of magnets that I got that I've been using to attach different eyes onto the puppets. So I put a magnet into the head of the puppet, into the eye socket, and then I put in another magnet into the actual eyes themselves, so they would attach in. So these little guys are so small and very strong, as you see. So, you know, even that close together and it'll attach. So these are little tiny things, and they this is a rare earth magnet, neodymium iron boron rare earth magnets, and they package them as if they're like radioactive or something. I just have been keeping all of my magnets in here, so there are all kinds of different magnets that you can use. These flat ones are nice because you can just cut them with scissors, and they often have adhesive on the one side, so you can use it. You could have like replaceable mouths that are magnetic. There's all kinds of options for magnets that are great, and I'll talk about the technique for setting up those magnets in the eyes. But yeah, these are so this was like 15 bucks. I got it at Dan's Crafts and Things, which is like a model train hobby store, but I'm sure you could find them online. So the strongest magnets are these rare earth magnets. Yeah, so you got to keep these, yeah, there's like a warning on here. You have to keep them away from like people's pacemakers and internal medical devices. They can be affected by magnets of this strength. They're brittle. They could ignite if drilled or machined. That's fun. Air transport could be an issue. Yeah, anyway. So I guess they're super dangerous, but they're also fun because magnets. Friggin' magnets, man. How do they work? Isn't that the Insane Clown Posse lyric? Whatever. It's good to have pliers. This one also has a wire cutter in it, right here. These are called needle nose pliers because obviously they have a really thin end to them. There are all kinds of different pliers that you can use, especially in jewelry. There are all kinds of different shapes of pliers. But these are great for bending wire or bending metal or bending anything really. And then you can obviously cut the wire in this little, there's a little blade inside there. This is another thing that I stole from my dad and will not be giving back. Here I have, this is a jewelry saw, so this is for cutting metal. You've got a very, very tiny blade there, which can be really annoying when you first start using it. You can get packs of blades. This is 144 blades, which obviously you break blades very easily. That's why they sell them in packages of 144. But they're good for getting into little places, cutting up the brass tubing, all kinds of stuff. So I like to keep it around in case I need it during shooting. So that's all I've got in terms of having a shooting kit. It's not mandatory, but if you're shooting on a regular basis, you might want to have these kind of things around just to help you out. It sucks to be in the middle of a shoot and be like, God, I really wish I had that tool that I left at home. So yeah, it's definitely recommended that you have a shooting kit. I hope you learned about some of the materials and supplies and stuff that we can use for stop motion. Hooray. Okay, bye.